In this lecture, we're going to be learning and talking about warm and cool colors. Now, warm and cool colors are really important to your artwork, especially when you're doing digital paintings or anything with color, because it adds another level of contrast to your artwork. So like I said earlier in this course, anytime you can add contrast, whether it's through values, line weight, or even just texture, anything like that, or color, this is going to really help improve your artwork and really embellish it. So let's start learning about warm and cool colors. So the first thing you need to understand is what colors are warm and what colors are cool. So you can see right here that I have warm labeled right here on this side of the color wheel and cool labeled on this side. So where does this basically start and end? Well, when it comes to cool colors, it basically moves over here into the violet, reddish purple area, and over here it moves over here into this green area. And then the cool or the warm colors, they basically go, the center of it would be in this orangish area, and they move all the way out to this lime green and all the way out to red. So these are all your warm colors on this side, and all your cool colors are on the other side. Now, warm typically makes you feel a little bit more, it makes you feel warm, and cool might make you feel a little bit more chilly, even just by looking at the color. And so that's why we call them warm and cool colors. The warm colors tend to be in things like sunlight, and the cool colors tend to be in things like water, or ice, or snow, stuff like that. All right, now we don't always have to necessarily put two warm and cool colors together. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's say, for example, that we take this yellow right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and color pick that, and I'll just go ahead and paint some yellow right there. Now let's say that we wanted to add a shadow, because our shadows tend to be a cooler color in most cases. We would want to get a cooler version of this. So what I could do is I could go ahead and pick a blue. So let's say I pick this sort of teal blue right there, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that down in my color tray so it's darker. I can make my shadow out of that. And that looks pretty dang interesting, having that really blue shadow next to the orange or the yellow. But we don't always have to do that. So for example, sometimes to get a cooler shadow, you don't have to go that much cooler. You don't have to go all the way to the cool side. You can get a cooler version of your color, but still stay within the warm colors. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's reselect our yellow. And basically over here on our hue slider, we can slide our color like this. And we're in the yellows. All we have to do is just slide it a little bit more towards the warm colors. So I could slide that more into the lime green colors like that. And even though it's still within the warm colors, it's kind of this lime green right here. It's a cooler version of this yellow, and that's why it works. So if I go ahead and I darken this, so we get a more of a shadow tone, then I can go ahead and paint that in. And that would work really well as a shadow, and it looks more cooler than the yellow, and so it's creating that warm and cool contrast. As we paint more paintings throughout this course, you'll start to understand this concept a little bit more, that a warm color can still consist of a cool color, and a cool color can still be a little bit more of a warm version of a cool color. All right, so let's have a look at a few examples. So our first example is right here. So we have some sort of farm hills in Asia or some sort. And even though you may look at this and think that these are all cool colors, there's actually warm and cool colors. And like I said before, some of these colors, they're still a warm color, but they're also a cool color at the same time. So let's go ahead and color pick some of this and see what we're looking at color-wise. So let's start by picking this grass color up here. As we can see, it's basically like this yellowish green color, but it's pretty dang yellow. If we look over here, it shows yellow. It's very yellow. So that's very much a warm color. Even though this grass is green, it's very warm. Let's go ahead and let's color pick the shadow area. So as you can see here, it's more into the turquoise color. It's very desaturated, so it doesn't look as turquoise, and it's really dark, but you can see that it's basically more in the bluish green area. So this contrasting together is what makes this image look so beautiful, is having this really cool shadow area and then having this really warm, bright, highlighted area. Let's go ahead and continue on to another example. So right here, we have this beautiful example of not necessarily shadows being cooler and highlights being warmer. I mean, that is going on here in some places, but just overall, we only have really orange and purplish blue colors, which are really contrasting. If we go ahead and we color pick some of this, you can see that this is more of a purple color right there. If we color pick the sign, it's very orange. The bus is very purple. This area down here is more in the reddish purple area. So we have this very contrasting look between really warm colors and really cool colors, which makes the piece just look absolutely beautiful. So sometimes it's not necessarily just about making your shadows a cool color and your highlights a warm color. Sometimes it's just about actually incorporating your color scheme and making it warm and cool colors. All right, let's have a look at our last example. So right here we have a mountain range. Now this is one of the best examples I like to show when it comes to warm highlights and cool shadows. Is on mountain ranges, you tend to actually see this a lot in real life, is that the shadows are very blue and the highlights, especially at sunset, tend to be very either orange, yellow, or even maybe sort of a peach color. So let's go ahead and let's color pick these highlights. So you can see that the white parts or the snowy parts of the mountain, they're actually pretty red. So they're down towards the red. They're basically like a pink, a very, very light pink color. And then if we go ahead and we color pick the shadows, you can see that they're way more in the bluish green side. And that contrast is what helps this image look so amazing. So now let's go ahead and let's move on to a warm and cool project. So right here, attached to this lecture, you should be able to download this Photoshop file that I've created. It's just a simple little sketch or a little drawing that I did, and then I colored it in for you already. And what we're gonna do is we're going to add warm and cool highlights and shadows. Now, you don't always have to add warm highlights and cool shadows. You can always break the rules. So if you wanted to, you can make the shadows warm and the highlights cool. It's really up to you, and you can always change the layer of the highlights and shadows later to see what it looks like, and I'll even show you later in this lecture what that looks like. But for now, let's go ahead and break down this file real quick just so you know what's going on over here. So you can see over here in the layer tray, I'll go ahead and drag this up so you can see all of it. Oops. So over here in the layer tray, we have our white background, and then I also included the sketch, the original sketch that I did to draw this, just so you guys could look at it for fun if you wanted to. So there's the original sketch, and then on top of that, I did my clean black line art on a different layer, and then after I did that, then I went underneath that layer and I added in my color. And then I have two layers here. You'll see they're labeled shadows and highlights. And that's what we're going to be painting our shadows and highlights on. Now you'll also notice that we have these two colors over here on the color layer. And that is just the colors we're going to be using to be painting our highlights and shadows. Now, these highlight and shadow layers are using something called a clipping layer mask, which we haven't gone over that yet. So you don't have to worry about that. All you need to know is that basically what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to paint on top of this, but not paint outside the shape. So you can see I can paint like this, and it doesn't actually go outside of the shape of the color. So go ahead and undo that. Another thing about these two layers is they're utilizing specific type of layer mode. So right here, you'll see that one's multiplying, that one's screen. Don't worry about this either. I have it set up like this on purpose, so don't change these. This is what's gonna allow you to paint the highlights and shadows onto these layers. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start on my highlight layer, and I'm gonna go ahead and just color pick this orange or yellow color. And we're just gonna go ahead and start painting in where we wanna add some highlights. So I'm gonna start just by highlighting the edge of her face, and you'll notice that it's not the same color as that orange. That's why I picked these colors out for you, is just because these layer modes over here are a little bit complicated, so it might not make sense to you right now why this yellow color is showing up as a different color. But what it's doing is it's basically just giving me a warm highlight. Later in the course, we're going to be going over all the different layer modes so you can understand them and create your own layer modes to create all kinds of different effects. Now, if you accidentally overshoot in some areas, so for example, right there by your eye, I overshot. So I'll just go ahead and take my eraser, and all we have to do is just go ahead and erase that out. I'm going to go ahead and add a highlight right here on her nose as well. Just keeping it pretty thin. I think I'll add a little bit of a highlight like that too. Great. Maybe a little bit of highlight on her eyelids, something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a highlight along this edge of the hair. And then I can even add a little bit of some sheen or shine into her bangs right here. Just like that. Add a little bit of highlight up here on the top of her hair. So these highlights aren't incredibly realistic. This is more of an animation styled comic book style, or something that you might see in an animated TV show. But it's just to demonstrate how adding these warm highlights and then adding cool shadows really elevates our piece of artwork. I'll add a little bit of highlight down here on her turtleneck. And I can even add a little bit of a highlight right here on the philtrum part of her mouth, just to add a little bit more definition and form there. And then I can add a little bit of highlight on this top shoulder right here. And I'm going to leave this side over here in shadow, so I'm not going to worry about that. Let's go ahead and zoom out and see how this looks. It's looking pretty good. All right, so next, let's go ahead and move on to our shadow. So I'm going to select my shadow layer, and then I'm going to color select this cooler color. It's kind of a green color, and we're going to use that to create our shadows. So I'm going to add a shadow right here underneath her chin. And on this ear as well. You can add a little bit of a shadow right behind that hair. Maybe I'll bring that shadow around like this, actually. Don't be afraid to undo lines, because that's basically what most digital artists spend most of the time doing, is hitting the undo button and redrawing lines. I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this up with the eraser. So you can see that I can just take that and reshape that line with the erase tool. Alrighty. And then let's go ahead, let's add a shadow underneath this sideburn hair coming down and just really define that out. So that way it looks like it's actually lifted off the cheek. And then we can go ahead and add a shadow underneath the bangs. And the cool thing about this is you can add shadow anywhere you want. So even though I'm going over the skin tone and then going over the eyebrows here, you can see that it adds a shadow over all of it, and it just basically mixes this cool color with whatever color is already existing there. Let's go ahead and add a shadow on this part of the bangs. We'll have that continue all the way across to the front. Like that. Awesome. Go ahead and add a shadow up in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and figure out what kind of shape I want to create down here. I think maybe another curved kind of shape like this will look good. And then I can come back and clean that up with my eraser when I'm done filling this in. And remember that we're using a layer mask, so I can just go ahead and paint all the way out on the outside of the shape, and it's not going to overpaint. I'm not going to have to go back and clean that up. So that's why I set it up like that for you guys, because it makes it much easier. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and clean up this shape now. The eraser, and maybe soften that edge up a little bit. Then I'll go ahead and I'm going to take my brush and come across like this. Just get some shadow under those bangs. Perfect. Let's go ahead and shade in this side of her collar. Shade in this side of her shirt. See how this looks. Sometimes you have to play around and see what looks good. So let's put a shadow right along here, see how that looks. I think that actually looks pretty decent. Maybe I'll continue this shadow all the way up to there on the neck. And we can even go ahead and add a little bit of shadow on the bottom of her nose, like that. Maybe put some down there. See what happens if we put some shadow underneath her eyelids. It just makes it look like she's wearing heavy eyeliner, so I'm going to avoid that. Maybe we'll add some on her upper eyelid. See how that looks. Not too bad. Maybe just a little bit less. Something like that. Alright, let's go ahead and zoom out and see how this looks. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that sketch layer beneath because we don't actually want to see that. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So as you can see, just by adding these warm highlights and cool shadows, it really kind of changed the feel of this piece of artwork. So let's go ahead, let's see what it looks like when we turn these layers off. As you can see, it just looks very flat. There's not a whole lot of contrast. I did go out of the way to use a warm color for her skin tone, and then I used a cooler color, this purple and this purplish blue for her shirt. So this already started out with warm and cool colors, but we went ahead and we furthered that by adding in these layers of cool shadows and warm highlights. Now really quick, let's go ahead and let's see what it looks like if we were to reverse these. So if we made the shadows a cool color, or the shadows a warm color, and we made the highlights a cool color, we're going to go ahead and reverse that now. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to Image, and then Adjustments, and then Hue and Saturation. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and slide it. So I'm going to slide it all the way over to the right. And you can see that that made all of my shadows become more of a warm color. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And then I'm going to come to my highlight layer and I'm going to do the same thing. So come up to Image and then Adjustments and then come down to Hue and Saturation. And I'm going to go ahead and drag that all the way over to reverse it and then go ahead and hit OK. Even though these highlights are actually still blue, like I said, they're warmer than the original color. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So once you download this file and you do this project, I want you to go ahead and post it to the Q&A section. If you want, you can even try messing around and changing the different colors for the highlights and the values and see what it looks like. Thanks for watching this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.